So after a bit of a hiatus for the sport of rugby league, and also, of course, for our rugby league man Steve Green, like all sports, has been on a bit of a break, and it now looks like there's some light at the end of the tunnel, and we're ahead. So we're going to have a chat to Steve and get his thoughts on how things are looking and how he sees this strangest of seasons unfolding. So, how are you going, Steve?
Yeah, good. Thanks, Mark. Thanks for having me. And yeah, it is a strange season, and it's a strange feeling. It felt strange the first two rounds because you just had the feeling it wasn't going to keep going. So, when I prepare for a season, I like to kind of get into the momentum and the groove, and it was kind of a bit of a stunted start because you kind of knew it was going to come to an end at one time. So, but the good thing is, first of all, the good thing is footy's back, and rugby leagues look like it's one of the first sports in the world to be fully functioning again as of next Thursday. So that's great. And yeah, the time off's given it's given me some time to have a look at things, especially how the first two rounds went, and also for a few players to kind of get back from their injuries. And it's actually looking like a pretty strong start to the season squad-wise. So very excited.
Yeah, so just a quick recap for those who might have forgotten. It's been quite a while. So we are 2 rounds into the season, and we pick up and go at round 3 starting next Thursday.
Yes, yeah, they've named the entire draw, but only the venues for the first 9 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, no crowds. They've, as I'll talk to later, they've narrowed it down to just a few grounds. But yeah, no, they are all set, and I think the Eels kick off against the Broncos in what will be a blockbuster Thursday.
No worries. So I might just start with some real basics just to bring everyone up to speed who might not be. So you mentioned that they've outlaid the fixture, but no venues haven't done the venues for the whole year yet. So where are we at? Normal season length, etc.
It's been shortened to 20 rounds. So typically there's 25 rounds, but with a couple buys chucked in. So overall, there's not going to be that fewer games played per team. So only talk about this being an asterisk season if you do become premiers, I think it's just rubbish. it's pending the competition going ahead and not stopping again for any kind of breakout. This is a genuine full, close to full season, and there'll be plenty of opportunities. The state of origin is going to be at the end of the year, so that won't break up the momentum of the NRL season proper, which I think is a good move. And I actually predict that will be the position going forward. I think they'll see that this works best, a post-season state of origin, or so we'll see. But yeah, so and then there's talk about also post-season internationals, and I cover all them for members, and past members of past seasons have probably seen we've had some pretty good results in some of that post-season international action too. So from now until pretty much Christmas, there's going to be rugby league on the screens, I reckon. So yeah, very good.
Yeah, so just on the timing of the NRL season, so it generally finishes up with the grand final at very end of September, start of October. What's the timing around that looking like?
I think sorry, I have got the draw. I know that Origin's going to be played in November,
Right.
3 weeks after each other, and so I think the grand final is actually scheduled for the last week in October now.
Yeah.
So instead of it being the first weekend of October, it's the last weekend of October. So yeah, pushing it back about 4 weeks to try and make up as much time as possible before it gets into silly Christmas season. It'll feel different, but I think there'll be enough familiarity there with how things are working that we'll get used to it pretty quickly.
Yeah, it's obviously a little bit different timing, but it's really not that much different. And once we get back into the swing of it, hopefully, as you were saying, momentum's a big thing for everyone, including yourself. So I think once we get back into it, it'll be have a bit of familiarity about it.
Yep.
Good stuff. All right. We'll just got a few notes here. I might just basically throw over to you, and might ask a few questions along the way, but otherwise I might just throw over to you. Just with our opening notes there, just a bit of a summary of your history with Champion Bets. This is your 5th season with Champion Bets, so 4 out of 4 winning seasons, and overall profit of 9.4% profit on turnover, which is extremely good. And service-wise, members get a full match preview for every match, and they also get their 6 to 8 best bets per week, which is what makes up the official results. And in terms of what you cover, the NRL, obviously, that we're talking about. State of Origin, which, as we said, this year, rather than being in the middle of the season, is at the end. And also the post-season internationals. It sounds like there'll be a few of them as well. So, that second bit there is just a little bit about your own background. So that's something we've covered plenty of times before, but maybe just quickly, if we've got people joining us for the first time, did you want to just take us through your background really quickly?
Yep, no worries. So, a rugby league fan for life. Kind of got onto the stats side of things about 20 years ago when it was still a very kind of amateur part of the game. Rugby league probably only had a few metrics, and over the years, I've just kind of, as new stats have come out, I've integrated them into my model. I've also tried to work out how I can use my kind of intuition and my understanding of the game to build off what was at one stage a pure statistical approach. So probably a lot more judgment now used as to when I think things are value. But yeah, 5th season now of Champion Bets. Feel like we've really hit some form at the end of the last season, and first round this year wasn't the greatest, but bounced back round 2 with a few wins, and I'm pretty sure we'll get into the black soon. And I've got some good futures bets which I'll talk through now too. So yeah, that's a little bit about me. I'm always happy to answer questions from members if ever anyone kind of wants to get an insight into what I'm thinking or how I handle a certain situation. Sometimes it's, I think, just reassuring for people to know that I am across certain things. But yeah, I'd like to think I'm pretty helpful and approachable for all the members, and yeah, so I'll get stuck in because I don't like self-promoting too much. I like the results speak for themselves. But so yeah, just a quick update of what I'm going to cover today. 2020 season rebooted, so just go through the futures bets that have been placed. On that, the bookmakers have taken a varied approach to how they handle it. Some of the top sports of the world, the good bookmakers have allowed you to choose where possible. Obviously, some markets simply have fundamentally been altered beyond the point of being able to maintain, so they have to kind of refund them. But yeah, mostly you're able to choose whether to keep it or not. But yeah, I'll get to our futures bets in a second. But I mean, all of them I definitely would suggest holding on to. Nothing's been totally blown away by the first 2 weeks. I'll just go through some player movements. There's been a bit of movement, which I think is quite important. 1 or 2 in particular for our futures bets. There's a new draw, obviously, which I've touched on briefly, but I'll just kind of go through and talk about how that affects our futures bets and any other observations there. New rules, which is surprising, but yes, part of the reboot was to actually save some money on referee costs. So they've gone back to 1 referee, and also a really good rule change to speed up the flow of the game. It's something I've been calling for. Members will probably know and probably sick of hearing about it, but the tactic of giving away a deliberate penalty in your defensive zone just to slow down the opposition, and the fact that it took them so many years to actually crack down on this with a rule change is concerning, but they got there eventually. And whilst there's a few risks with how it could be exploited or how it could be determined by refs, I think overall it's going to be positive, and I think it's going to have a pretty big impact on the points scored. And then I'll just go through. Members got some early mail for round 3, a few bets there. I'll just talk you through my thinking there, so you can kind of get an insight into how I look at markets and where I think value might be. And yeah, so we'll get started. So the futures bets here I've kind of listed and just given you a bit of a rundown on what's happened to them since they went out. So top one there is the Warriors for least season wins, most losses, whatever you want to call it. We got on at 6 or better. Neds and Ladbrokes had 7 at the time, which hopefully most members got on. They're sitting second last at the moment, and something I flagged was that the depth was a worry for them, particularly in the forwards. Since then, they've lost another prop forward for a long-term injury. So, I mean, they really are at desperation stakes now. We're at the point where they're talking about old players coming out of retirement to do a short contract for the Warriors, but they've picked up a few players, which I'll get to later, a few fringe forwards from other clubs, which was necessary, but it does kind of show you just how short they are on talent. So pretty comfortable with that one, particularly as they've had to, unfortunately for them, come across and play in Australia for the remainder of the year. So I've heard a few people say, "Oh, that could actually make them bond and bring them together." And it may. I think most of the time I kind of look past those things because you just don't really know. It could be frustrating for them, and they could be missing home, and there could be resentment within the camp. So for anyone to just presume that they're all sitting around singing "Kumbaya" and bonding together every night, I don't know. You can't really look into those things. I look into what I can assess, and I'm pretty comfortable with how poor they started, losing both their games. And so I think we're on to something pretty good there. We do need the Titans to improve because part of this bet was about basically predicting that the Titans wouldn't be as bad as everyone thought, but they they probably were worse in the first two rounds. So that was surprising. I think they'll improve. I don't think it was. I think their opposition made them look bad too. I think they played some good teams. But yeah, we want Titans to start winning a few because they're the favourite for the spoon. And so that's looking fine. The next one, Eels to be the premiers at $11. They're sitting first, and they looked at the poor form team in the opening two rounds. Their plucky little number 9 was injured, but it was not as long a layoff as possible, and he's a chance of starting for round 3. So they've shortened into $7.50 is the best price I could find looking today. I think that will probably shorten a bit further in coming weeks, but I certainly wouldn't be recommending him at $7.50. I think 11 was a good entry point. I'm just happy to sit on that and see how they go, and hopefully they shorten and continue to improve. They've been given a good deal with the Bank West Stadium being one of the grounds kept open, so that's their home ground and a ground they had a lot of success in last year. So even without it being packed full of fans, you'd like to think that they've got a pretty good feeling at that ground. So that's good. West went 1-1 in the first two games, sitting 9th, which is a bit of a joke amongst West fans because they finished 9th a lot and miss out on the 8th, kind of like the Richmond in the AFL, but more previously. They looked good. I actually think that of all these bets, the one shortened to $2.90 is the best I can find. So I think people have realised that they may be a little bit better than what they thought pre-season. But the signing of Harry Grant, who's from the Storm stable, and was really, I keep ratings for the Queensland and New South Wales Cup, the lower leagues, partly because I intended to bet on them this year, but with them being basically definitely rubbed out for the year, that's not going to happen. But it does help me understand how good some of these fringe players are. Harry Grant was off the charts last year, playing for the Storm feeder club. He's a sensational signing. The Storm didn't want to let him go, but I think realised that for his own development and for the club, because it's only a one-year swap, so they get him back, it's probably worth letting him go to West and develop his game in first grade. But that was the one spot where West were probably a bit weak, and I think he'll make that spot his own. And yeah, really happy. I'm just actually noticing I said take down to $2.90. So yeah, best price was $3.25. You can still get $2.80. So I'll have to have another look at their draw and have a think about things. But yeah, West are a team that I've got high hopes for in 2020. I think they look fit, well drilled, and some really good signings. So that's that one. The other two are pretty speculative plays. Half unit on Kyle Flanagan to be leading point scorer. He's drifted to 50. Roosters started poorly. He started poorly. There's some talk about him being a weak link. People like Braithen Astor from Fox Sports, I really don't put much credit into those kind of views. He's a very good player. He's a very good kicker. He's at a club that has a really good structure around him. He's a lot of his teammates, I think, have said that they really admire his composure for his age, and I think he's the best choice for 7. He's a good kicker, and they're the premiers 2 years in a row. So I'm happy to ride that out, even though it's drifted. I probably wouldn't get on for more at the moment, just because it is a speculative play. It's frustrating when those things blow out, but yeah, we'll just watch and see. There might be an opportunity to top up there if the market doesn't catch on and he blows out further. And the final one is on Ravawala, the Fijian flyer for the Dragons. That market hasn't been reopened from what I can see. They're usually not once the season starts. Most tries for the Dragons at 6 or better. $7 was being offered at Top Sport. He scored one from his opening 2 games. I think he scored in the opening minute of the whole competition, which was a pretty good start for that bet. But Duffy and Lomax have both scored 2 since and have looked pretty good. But for a winger, and I think he played well, so I think he's going to hold his spot. I'm pretty happy with that price. I think a Fijian winger, just they know how to score tries, and he's a real powerhouse. So pretty happy with that one too, and keen to watch the Dragons play this year. So futures looking pretty good. That's kind of what we're cheering at the moment. During the year, I have been known to add to them if I think that something's out of whack. So we'll keep an eye on any new bets, or even potentially if I don't think the market's reacted enough, I can even top up those kind of bets, and we've done that before too. So we'll keep an eye on that. But
so just
the next slide,
so you had basically three of the futures bets you're ahead of the market, and one's gone the other way, and one we're not sure of yet. But so 3 and 1's a pretty good ratio in terms of being ahead of the market.
Yeah, and the 3 that you'd want to be ahead on are the 3 bigger,
exactly,
longer term futures bets. So, if I'm going to be losing on one, the half a unit speculative play on Flanagan's the one I'd want to be have it drifted on. And I mean those markets bounce around anyway. Yeah. He could rack up 16 points next round 3, and all of a sudden be third favourite and paying $10, which is actually a fair chance of happening. So
30, 40, 50 is only a couple of turns anyway. So it's
exactly.
Can sound dollar-wise like a big drift, but it's actually not.
No, exactly. So the futures are looking good, and that's always reassuring, because that's kind of, if you get something massively wrong or multiple massively wrong, then you've got to kind of ask yourself what your model was saying at the beginning, where there's round to round there's more variance in your performance. So round 1 we lost a few there, but I certainly wasn't panic stations, because I've had losing starts the season before and come back strong, and I felt like we bounced back pretty quick, and I started seeing it a lot better. So once we get a few rounds back to back, hopefully you'll start really getting some profits for members. Player movements, I mean, strangely enough, there has been a few. I've missed some here. These are just some of the more noticeable ones. McCulloch, long-term Broncos number 9, looked like he was going to be replaced by Turpin this year. That's definitely the case now. He's moved to the Knights, so obviously he wasn't in the futures plans of Anthony Seibold. Bit of a strange move from the Broncos, because I think they don't have too much depth there, but they must have a plan to maybe move one of their many halfbacks into the number 9 spot. That's the only thing I can think of, because Turpin hasn't had enough time to really play 80 minutes week in, week out, I think. So we'll see how that fares, but it's a good pick up on the Knights. Slade Griffin was their long-term number 9, who has, I think, been medically retired now. He's had multiple knee operations, but they were really mucking around there with lots of options, and I think they decided that snapping up an experienced number 9 that's played State of Origin is probably a pretty good move. So we'll keep an eye on the Knights. They let us down last year. We were on them to make the top 4, and they bombed out big time. But any team with Kalen Ponga, Clemmer, Pearce, and some really good young guns, there's a bit to like there, and so he could be a good acquisition. Just skimming through the other ones, Raiders have let go of some fringe forwards, and Luke Bateman. There's reports that he was apparently seeking a release or wanted to leave the club over a pay dispute, which is a bit of a shock for Raiders fans, because he's very well liked and he was such a success last year coming from England, that you're kind of surprised that this is the case. But it does suggest that maybe they've had to shed some talent to keep Bateman happy by upping his contract. It sounds like they got him on a bit of a bargain, considering he was one of the stars of the season last year. So that's just something to keep an eye on, because Raiders don't have too much depth in their forwards. They've got a great starting pack and a few good bench players, but if they were to lose a few, I'm not sure they have as much depth as they have in previous years. I've already touched on Grant going to West, Momorowski going to the Storm. Really great deal by West. I mean, I don't mind Momorowski, but he's certainly not the calibre of Grant, and they probably weren't going to play him out wide. So it's a great deal for West. And if Storm think they can get something out of him out wide, well, good on them. But yeah, that's an interesting one to watch, just mainly because it's the first swap of its nature in the code. Broncos, Matt Lodge has made a miraculous recovery. Looked like he was going to be out with an ACL for the year. Somehow that's not the case, and he's been cleared to play. So, and he's a chance of playing in round 3. So he's a real leader of this pack. And one of the reasons I was worried about the Broncos was when he got injured pre-season, who would lead this young pack around? But with him coming back and the way the Broncos started, once again, Broncos let me down last year. The 2 futures bets where I really did blow it were Knights to make the top 4 and Broncos to win the comp. Admittedly, anyone that knows me knows I confront my losses and I admit to them, and they were both losses last year. But yeah, like I said, maybe I was a year early on both of them because the Broncos really did look good. The young players have developed. Milford looked fantastic. Going to miss Jack Bird. He's out for the year so far. That doesn't seem like it's changing. But yeah, just going to keep a really good eye on the Broncos. They are missing Fafita and Pangai Jr. for a few weeks through injury and suspension, who are their 2 best forwards in my view. So they might come back to earth in the next few weeks. So there might be an opportunity to get in there on the Broncos if they do drop a few in a row, because I think they're going to come good. South, James Roberts is in rehab. But then I also read today he's a chance of playing round 3. So who knows what's going on there. But it doesn't sound like he's had an ideal transition back to Sydney. And South did look pretty poor, to be honest, in their opening few games. So I'll have to see if Wayne Bennett can turn them around. I think he will, because they've got a great squad. So we'll watch them with interest. And the Warriors, just, yeah, like I mentioned earlier, Armour, really probably the most underrated player in the whole competition, in my view. I just think he's week in, week out, an absolute rock for whatever club he plays for. Not flashy, but it's the kind of player, as a former player, I know you really miss having next to you, the kind of guy that takes the hard runs and does the hard work. So for a team that was already short on forwards, that's a really big loss. And yeah, part of the reason, as you'll see later, that we're backed against Warriors in round 3, because I don't think that's his loss has been priced in by the market. I mean, it's a kind of example where the market did not move at all. Where if it was a halfback or a 5'8", you'd probably have 2, 3 or 4 points move. And I just think that a really good front rower, when you're already short on front rowers, is it should be moving lines a little bit. So we'll have a look at how Warriors can handle that. Moving on, new draw. I actually first started looking at draws a long time ago, and I'm not tooting my own horn, but I don't think it was properly analysed at the time when I did do it. And I had a bit of a system where basically I looked through. I used a formula where you add up the for and against, the points differential of each opponent the team plays, using that as kind of a proxy for how hard an opponent they are. So, for an example, Titans were minus 300 points last year, and their points differential. Roosters were plus 400 or something. That just showed what a big difference there was over the course of a season. You tally up all the opponents of predicted teams, and you'd get a number that would kind of give you a really rough indication of how hard or easy a draw was. It was just a crude measure that I used to get a feel for it. I've seen that similar kind of approach now employed, maybe a bit more sophisticated. The problem that I have with putting too much emphasis in it, and this is from someone that's tried to use it, is that it relies on last year being indicative of this year for one. So when teams improve rapidly and you factored them in for, you put them as a soft opponent based on their previous points differential, then it quickly makes your analysis meaningless. And in particular, I think for this year, because there's been this break and there's so much uncertainty, I actually think people are overanalyzing the draw. So the main things I've looked at here are just the venues. So what teams have been gifted the ability to play at their regular home ground. Well, that's the Cowboys at their new stadium up in Townsville. Eels at their Bankwest Stadium, like I mentioned. West will either play at Campbelltown or Bankwest. Either are kind of basically their home. Broncos get to play at Suncorp, where they always play, and the Storm get to play at Amy Park. So, every other club's doing some kind of camp, playing at a foreign ground. these clubs will have a little bit of familiarity, so that's a tick for them. So when I'm doing my analysis on all teams involving those games involving those teams, that's a slight factor that will always nudge them up a bit, but not too much. I don't think it's a massive issue. To be honest, players are pretty good at picking up and playing at various grounds because there's no fans, so you're not going to have that home ground fan advantage factored in. Futures bets.
Just quickly on that. I'm not sure if you're going to touch on it later, but I know you said earlier that it's, with the Warriors, I think it's hard to analyse these things, which we basically haven't had before, so there's maybe not much point. But in terms of the crowds, we've got a bit of an indication in rounds 1 and 2. Do you think there's an impact on the game? You maybe touched there a bit on, obviously the home ground advantage being less of a factor.
Yeah, it's a good one. I mean, I just don't think we've got enough data to assess crowdless rugby league. I mean, I think about halfway through this year, we'll have a better view, and I certainly intend to do some kind of backwards analysis to see what's happened, and is there a trend with points? Is there a team with trend with at the end of games? Because some of these hypotheses that were put forward was that teams will slacken off at the end because it's the fans that drive them to make that. We didn't really see that. So yeah, it is hard to know. I do think that the fans have a big role to play in generating 50-50 calls for their team and marginal penalties. It's not even, some people say, the home team only wins the penalty count by half a penalty. So there goes your theory that, home fans win penalties. But it's not what you see, it's what you don't see that sometimes is the favouritism. So it could actually be that the home team should have lost the penalty count significantly because they were getting away with blue murder in the ruck, but they only, they maybe ended up even on penalty counts. That doesn't mean that the away team wasn't ripped off just because they ended it on equal penalty counts. So I do think people maybe were underestimating just how much it doesn't matter whether you're listed as home and away in this kind of environment, because I think there is still a subconscious element of people going, they're at home to them because they're listed first, and whether that even just feeds into market kind of mispricing because people are just reacting to, they're at home. Yeah, no, at home they should win. Where I look at now pretty much every game as a neutral venue, and like I said, just besides those 5 clubs where they might have some familiarity, that might change it very, very minimally. But previously the home ground advantage was about 6 points for a regular season, so that's going to change things. And that's once again, I've mentioned this in previous years. I kind of love when there's this kind of randomness and uncertainty because I back myself to adjust faster than the market does to what's happening. So we'll see. Whether there's an angle there of backing, whether there's a tendency to maybe back away listed teams for value. That could be something which proves over time. So we'll keep an eye on that.
Yeah, pardon my ignorance, but just on teams like the Cowboys and the Broncos and the Storm, are they playing all their home games at their own ground, so that they don't have to move any home games to neutral grounds like the other teams do?
Yes. So
it is a genuine advantage for them.
Well, you now have me worried that I haven't double checked that enough. So let me double check exactly I'll check later how the Storms, for instance, because I just know I know they're playing the Raiders this week in Melbourne, and I think that once you kind of get this system set up, it would be very surprising if you decided to. So I just had a quick look, and the Storms' next few home games are at Amy Park. So I think.
I thought that would be
next
the
few ones
case.
are Amy. So
just thought they might
no, it's a good question.
Try to even it up.
Yeah, no, you'd think that would be a smart thing to do, and give teams basically force them to play away from their home ground as a home ground. But I think this is about obviously convenience and ease of movement of players, and they probably have to sacrifice a bit of fairness and evenness in the layout. So. I think, like I said, I think Melbourne Cowboys in particular, because they are, you've got the climate factor there. So even without a crowd, going to Townsville has always been a pretty hard game. So when I say, I only tweak it a little bit, I'll tweak it different amount based on certain factors. So Cowboys at Townsville and the Storm at Melbourne. you've got the cold. Melbourne's a fair bit colder, particularly if they're playing Queensland teams, which is always a bit of an intimidating factor. And vice versa, playing up in towns where you see how much it takes out of teams at the end, final 15 minutes. Cowboys often run over teams there because they're more acclimatised. So, yeah, you still have climate, and you have familiarity, and you have them training at home and living at home. So, yeah, definitely an uneven factor to the draw. We'll just have to see how much of an uneven factor it is.
Speaking of the cold, no games in Canberra?
No games in Canberra yet. My place of birth and the home of the Mighty Raiders, but yeah, I'm not sure why that's the case, because I think ACT is probably one of the safest places in Australia right now for the COVID count. But I did read it was something to do with actually, and I don't know how Campbelltown fits into this because it's not the most beautiful stadium, but it was actually about selecting grounds that presented well for TV, because they want to boom this into the US audiences mainly. That's where they really think there could be a bit of growth to happen. But obviously over in England, they haven't got their Super League back going, so it's a real opportunity to showcase the NRL. And while you're going to have empty stadiums, I think they thought that Bruce Stadium, Canberra Stadium as it's called now, isn't the most attractive ground to look at on TV, and same with the other ones that are a bit more suburban, Leichhardt and so forth, when they're empty. So they've chosen grounds that apparently present well. So who knows what their actual reasoning was there, but it is what it is, and it is only for 9 weeks, and until round 10. So we'll see what happens after that. There's still a lot of, and maybe they'll counteract it with the draw for the rest of the rounds. So you wouldn't want to be piling on to one of these teams to win the comp because you think they're going to have this advantage all year.
Yeah, sure.
So yeah, lots of uncertainty, but we'll see how it plays out. Futures bets. I've just gone through. One of the other uneven factors of the draw is that you don't play everyone twice. So a quick way of looking at how tough your draw is just to look at how tough the opponents are that you play twice. Parramatta had a really easy draw last time around. That using that kind of formula that I described, that's a basic way that I do it, and it screamed that Parramatta and Raiders and Wests actually all had quite easy draws. I haven't had the chance, obviously, with the games just being named recently, to insert those numbers and go through that same process here, but I will do it. But I think at the moment, a Parramatta's draw is probably a little bit tougher than it was, but not that much. I mean, you got Manly, as the only team that made the finals last year. Well, the Broncos are there, but bundled out. Bulldogs, Panthers, and West all struggled. I mean, I think West are going to be good this year. I think Manly's a good team. I think Broncos are really hard to watch. I don't think it's a dream run. I also think Panthers are going to have a more resurgent year. So I don't think Parramatta. Every team's pretty competitive in the NRL. Warriors and Titans, if you could play them twice, that would be considered, I think, an easy draw because they're 4 games you probably should win. But other than that, really, it depends on when you get them. And West play Knights, Dogs, Panthers, South, and Eels. Well, yeah, I mean, all 3 of those lineups are pretty run of the mill. If anything, the Warriors probably have the hardest there because I think they've got Raiders, Sharks, and Manly, who are all kind of well and truly top 4 teams, top 8 teams last year, and the Panthers and Knights, who look like they're a bit resurgent this year. So good news for us. The Warriors haven't been given an easy draw to add to their woes. So that's just a quick overview of the draw.
Yep.
New rules. Now, this has attracted a lot of attention for rugby league diehard because the one referee rule, which is actually being challenged now in Fair Work Australia. So it's actually not settled, and it's I won't get into the politics of labour laws and what's fair and what's not fair, but as a cost-saving measure, they've decided to have one referee. The view is that that will allow a lot more wrestling because that was one of the reasons you brought a second ref in, was to clean up the ruck. But the argument against that is, well, international football has had one referee, and there's plenty of evidence that if refereed properly by one ref, then you can still have a good ruck. What I think is going to happen is they're going to use the bunker a lot more. So I know they now have a metric where they record the play the ball speed in terms of, that's a stat that they produce. So there's someone with a stop clock on the ruck, and I could see them kind of being reliant on some form of tip off where a team is continually slowing down their opponents. It wouldn't just be done on time because sometimes you deserve the right to slow down your opponents with a dominant tackle. But I think some combination of touch judge assistance, bunker, and technology and an awareness of not wanting to slow the game down will all combine to make it that those fears aren't played out, that the game won't slow down. And if anything, it could be overcompensated for because they don't want to have that criticism label at them. So it'll be interesting to see. That's certainly a big factor that I'll be looking at, is how total points are played, what the ruck speed's like. And because countering that is the 6 again rule. So something I've complained about for a long time. Deliberate penalties. The Roosters won the competition after giving away the most penalties of any team in the competition. And that was a year after the Storm won the competition by doing the same thing. So somebody finally caught on that said, hey, wait a minute, teams that can give away penalties are still winning the competition. Maybe the penalties aren't being enforced in a proper, effective way. And it was this deliberate, I've called it deliberate error tactic. Sorry, it's a deliberate penalty tactic. And so basically what will happen is 10 metres out, the third tackle, you've got momentum. The opponent gives away a penalty by intentionally holding you down for too long. Instead of the ref coming over, standing there, pointing his finger, blowing the whistle, the team defence getting set and then coming back up, it's the referee will just wave their hand like it's a 6 to go and say 6 again. So effectively, the attacking team gets the same benefit, which is a whole new set of 6, but they don't slow down at all. Now, the concern is, so that's a big advantage for the attacking team. It's a really big change in how the game will be played and how defences will cope with momentum going against them. So the Raiders got to the grand final last year, and I'm a Raiders supporter, just to put it out there. And I'll admit, they milked this rule for all it was worth. The amount of times they would give penalties away on the line and just get themselves set, it really was a foolproof tactic. I was actually amazed more teams didn't do it. The risk now is if teams decide that they'll keep giving away penalties, because obviously you still get a 6 again, it slows it down for a split second. The refs have said they'll then send bin very quickly as well. So this is very bullish for lots of points being scored. I mean, I could really see a game where you have 12 on 12 and, players a team getting back-to-back 6 again. And you could really see in the later parts of games, points kind of getting piled on when a team's in a dominant mood. I haven't released total points for round 3 yet, but I'll be very interested to see how they react, because you've got two competing factors here. And I think if people overread the one referee factor and underread the 6 again rule, then going overs as a across-the-board tactic, or at least a general tactic, could be a lucrative play. So that's just a kind of insight into why I think rules matter, and understanding how teams strategize really matters, because there's clear impacts on betting markets by these things. So once again, a bit of change, something that changes things, is always positive for me, because it will open up an angle potentially to exploit before the market catches on. So maybe I'll be wrong there and they'll all go under and I'll change my tactics really quickly. But very keen to see how that plays out.
Yeah, okay.
New rules, and finally, just because it's now under a week away till we kick off, so it's not that weird talking about round 3 bets. I went up early this because I really thought that the lines would move in my favour. The Dragons, as explained earlier, they're playing the Warriors. They lost their first 2 games, but they were kind of competitive in both and looked okay at times. So I don't think I think people, the Dragons have been pretty ordinary for a while now, and I think people have kind of given up faith in them a little bit. But I still think they've got a strong squad. They looked good in the preseason. I think their form was underrated by the strength of their opponents. I think their opponents played really well in the first 2 rounds. So I went Dragons to win at $1.65 or better. It's mostly gone now, although I think there is maybe one bookie still offering 165. But you could certainly, when I said that, you could get 170 or even 173 at some. That's another thing, just for prospective members, that I'd probably like to point out, is that I never push the angle when I'm quoting odds as to what I suggest for the members. Is I'd always rather underquote by a few cents as to what's out there and let them get on at the price that is value, rather than picking out one bookmaker that's offering a price well above everyone else and pinning my price on that, which does add up over a long term. But I think it provides members with just a little bit more customer satisfaction that that I'm not, that I'm being fair and square and being honest in my dealings. And I'd like to think after 4 years of champion bets that you wouldn't have too many members that said, "Oh yeah, that's Steve Green. He's dodgy. He does this. He does that." I'd like to think I play with a straight bat. And, so 165 is probably underquoting what was out there. Hopefully, a few of the members got better than that. But that's shortened a bit. Wests and Cowboys is about the same, which I find a bit surprising. I think people aren't factoring in how good Harry Grant will be for Wests, and just how volatile Cronulla is, their opponent. So, I'll have another look at that one. I went 2 units for all these because, there was still a lot of uncertainty. But as things become more certain, there's always an opportunity, if the odds haven't moved much, to top up these bets. So we'll have a look at that closer to game day. And the Cowboys are playing the Titans, and similarly, there was -7.5 when I went out at -8. But I wanted people to get on at -8. I thought that was still definitely worth getting on, and that you can still get that. I think the Cowboys they didn't start as well as I would have thought that they were going to start. But Valentine's Holmes coming from a long layoff, a few new combinations at 9 in the halves. So really good forward pack. And some slick outside backs that they've picked up. Esan Masters, Drinkwater recently, and obviously Holmes. The Cowboys, and with their home ground advantage up at Townsville, I think they could be a bit of a smoky this year. So we'll watch them with interest too. But just a little bit of a rundown there. Dragons, it's really about betting against the Warriors. West, well, that's evident of me backing them to make the top 8. That I think they'll win games like this more often than not this year. So 225, I'll be taking West against teams like Cronulla quite often, and the Cowboys once again, kind of betting on their combinations to improve and to get over the Titans with a big win. So there'll be more bets to come, but they're the ones that went out early, and just thought I wanted to run through them just to give prospective members an idea of the kind of bets I make. So that was everything I wanted to run through today. I hope that's helpful. And Mark, if you had any other questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
No, I think you've covered everything really well. So, it's a decent update. As you said, it's going to be a bit of a different period for the game. So a few things we have a pretty good idea of, but a few unknowns as well. So it's going to be interesting, if nothing else. So, actually looking forward to it now it plays out. And I assume you're looking forward to it as well. Your weekends, I'm guessing, would have been a bit different over the past couple of months.
Yeah, no, my wife's had me watching all kinds of TV shows, and just didn't feel right on a Friday night cold to be watching a TV show. So my whole life I've watched football. I mean, it really was a shock to the system for someone like me that kind of, does rugby league plays a big part of my life. And I really am. Cannot wait for next Thursday, and hopefully it'll be a nice, profitable season.
Fantastic. All right. Thanks for that, Steve. We look forward to next week. And if anyone's watching out there, and we've still got some room for people to jump on when the season restarts. And if they're keen to follow Steve, you won't find a better analyst when it comes to rugby league. So just jump on the website and there'll be links and the latest deals on there. So thanks for that, Steve, and we'll chat again soon.
Thanks, mate. Cheers, Mark.